So Joel, what's going on up with Haunted House this weekend?
So, as a number of the public know, because we announced it via our Facebook page, we're not running the Haunted House this fall, which was a very difficult decision. It was personally a little bit painful, but ultimately our committee felt that it was the right decision when the pandemic first came to our shores in March and in April. We had a number of committee meetings where we started talking like, this could wipe out haunt season. And a few of us, I remember Ryan Nace in particular, like, this will probably be over by then. I wasn't so convinced. I was like, man, they shut down the sports leagues over this. I was like, the people with money are worried. So we started looking at kind of contingencies. Like, all right, let's just proceed as we normally would. So we wrote our plan, what we call the PMG, as we normally would, got it approved through the board of directors, came up with our theme, our name, started coming up with room ideas, everything we would normally do, because that's what we could control at the time. Then we went through the process we usually do with the city of securing the location, and we got in there a little earlier than we usually do. We got in there, I think, in late June, and started altering the space. So as the summer went on, we followed the news, followed the executive orders, and we kicked the can as far as we could. We had a couple of different deadlines. We're like, all right, let's review things at July 31st. Let's review things at August 15th. And a lot of that was based on kind of our marketing calendar. Ultimately, the Fear Finder, which has been around for nearly 30 years in the Metro Detroit area, they decided they weren't going to publish because there was so much uncertainty in the industry. That's our single biggest marketing expense. So it got to the point where while it became legally allowed for us to run, we decided that we thought it was the best decision for the chapter and for our crew members that we didn't.
Yeah. Today is October 9th, and today entertainment venues, haunted houses and such, movie theaters are allowed to open under the governor's orders. Now there are haunted houses that have been open.
Yeah.
What's happening with those?
So I'm sure if you ask different people, you'll get different answers. But when it came time to, like, when, the rubber meets the road, I started looking at all of the different guidelines the state had put out. And I was like, okay, so we're in this phase, we're in this region of the state. At the time, we were in phase 4, region 1. And I was like, all right, what are haunted houses even classified as? Well, we're classified under entertainment, as specifically amusement. And before today, those venues were not legally allowed to run. So some places were running. Now, some of those venues are outdoor venues, so the rules may be a little bit different because they're outdoors. But there's no doubt in my mind there are haunted houses that chose to flout the order, and they took a risk in doing so. I did not feel that was worth the risk to our chapter in terms of community relations. It takes one black eye, to tarnish a reputation, and that was something we didn't want to do.
Okay. So moving forward, what's going on now at the haunted house? I'm fortunate to live close, so I see a lot of activity still happening.
Yeah. So I want to say most of the summer, I kept telling everyone we have to plan as if we're still running. We cannot assume that we're not going to be able to run. And it was a bit of irony because it sort of played out at the last minute, exactly as I had been warning. I was fairly convinced, based on the numbers that I was seeing, based on science, that we were not going to move from phase 4 to phase 5. I was a little surprised when the governor moved us into that phase. But even so, one of the things that we did in preparation of potentially running or not running, we drew up 3 different scenarios, okay? Like, this is the scenario for the project if we're not legally allowed to run. This is a scenario if we're legally allowed to run but we decide we shouldn't. And this is the scenario if we can legally run and we decide to go forward with it. So had to go through and rework our numbers. We have an expected profit we expect to come from the project. Well, normally we open the last weekend of September. So in September, we knew we were going to lose that last weekend of September and likely the first weekend of October. So it wasn't like we were flying blind, but we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants trying to make all these different adjustments. But ultimately, so we knew going in, if we don't open to the public, we are going to continue to hold our regular construction hours. We're going to continue to do things as a group to keep people engaged and continue to move the project forward. So right now, we are still in there building the show with the hopes that we can return for our Valentine's Day show, which we debuted earlier this year, Bloodlust. We hope to make that into an annual staple. And then we do think, we have some things internally for the crew. We've got a movie night, we'll do actor training, we'll do a makeup workshop. And you try and find the silver lining. It's a bummer that, for a lot of us creatively, that we can't run and scare people. It's a bummer for the chapter because it's one of our biggest fundraisers. So I've just tried to look for these silver linings, and the silver lining is we can continue to do things as a crew and build this up so that next year, if things are more under control, we can come out of the gates full force.
Right. I couldn't imagine, especially with social distancing, like you and I are 6 feet apart in the studio, how could you get the scare when you have to be 6 feet apart?
Yeah, there was, so again, back in the spring, we started asking ourselves, the whole industry, it was conversations taking place on Facebook groups. How do you scare people in this environment? So most of the safety measures we felt like we could confidently implement. It was going to alter the show. We had decided we weren't going to have any queue line acting. I'm generally one of the queue line actors. Queue line actor has to be right up in the face of the customers all night. Well, under these conditions, not something I want to do, not something customers are going to want, even if everyone's wearing masks. So we would not have had queue line actors. Social distancing in line would have been an issue because on our busiest nights, you're talking 300 people or more on a Friday or Saturday. We could distance them all the way down to Pennsylvania if we're putting 6 feet between each group. So that really isn't feasible either. What we would have had to have done and what a lot of haunted houses have done, they've gone entirely to online ticket sales. And some of them even, almost like even a time ticketing system. We went to one a few weekends ago, and you went up and bought your tickets, and then they asked you to return to your car, and then you got a text message when it was your turn to come stand in line. Obviously, we could have installed hand sanitation stations at the entrance and the exit. I really felt like most of the safety measures we could have done. Initially, I was dead set against our actors wearing masks because you can't emote with a mask on. We are an actor-driven haunted house, so we don't employ a lot of masks. We are more of a character sort of based haunted house, so there's really no need for us to be wearing masks that you might see at a Spirit Halloween or something you'd see in a horror movie. We don't do that. But I eventually warmed to the idea of masks, one, public safety, but two, because the theme we went with this year, I was like, maybe we can make this work with our theme. And then it was a volunteer here, he hosts local sports wrap-up, Marty Janeski. He came in one day to do his show, and he had a mask on, and on the front of his mask he had his own face printed, and when he moved it, it just created this sort of disjointed, creepy effect, and I thought, if we do something like that, if we essentially paint our faces on the masks or airbrush them out, that can be pretty unsettling. So that really just left what I thought were two worries. You mentioned the one. Once guests are in the haunted house, like I said the whole time, there's throw this idea out the window that our scares would social distance once they're in the haunted house. I was like, and any haunted house saying it is lying. You can't scare people from 6 feet away. Maybe initially you can shock someone if you're in a creepy pose or whatnot, or you're holding a threatening weapon. But when that character never comes any closer than your safety bubble, the effect is diminished. So that was one area where I was like, we just can't do that. And as a haunted house that depends on live actors, We just can't distance in that way. Now, some haunted houses like Erebus that can afford animatronics or that employ a lot of puppetry, okay, well, a puppet doesn't breathe, so not a problem. So that would have been a challenge. Now, we would have required the public to wear masks. We would have been in masks. But, and we do instruct our actors, there is a general rule in the industry of arm's length away from the customers. I mean, that's broken in queue line, but that's the nature of the queue line. But when you're in the haunted house, that's a general rule of thumb. It's for your safety and it's for the customer's safety. So that was a big concern. The other one was, once people are in the haunted house, once a group's in the haunted house, there's nothing to stop them from taking off their mask. We can't have our people in character trying to enforce, put your mask back on. And there's been a few incidents at haunted houses where, people didn't want to comply. I could see a lot of problems with that. In a normal year, you have a number of people who are intoxicated, or their minds altered in one form or another. And it happens. It's a problem. So we generally have to follow them through. But I know for those of us who run the project and like me in the queue line, like one of the things I do is interact with everyone that comes through the line. And you got to pick out like the people that might be a problem so that you can send word ahead to the people working behind the scenes to keep everyone safe. Like this guy needs to be followed. So I felt like in this atmosphere, the risk of those sort of problems was heightened.
Got it. Now, I know you mentioned that the mask you saw would work with your theme. You theoretically could have opened, so it's got a name and a theme. What is it?
Yeah, so this goes back a couple of years. The theme is a circus or carnival, however you'd like to think about it. The name is Circus Sinister. This goes back a couple of years. I am a huge fan of circuses and carnivals being portrayed in the horror genre. I think when you take something that is ordinarily happy and joyful, even, kind of promotes this feeling of ecstasy, and then you just turn it on its ear, like, no, it's horrifying and twisted and all messed up. So this was something Danny and I talked about a few years back. But the problem always was, with the nature of our project, we get a building from the city, we tear it down at the end of the year, and then we got to generally get a new building, start all over. Well, the last several years, I think, was it now 6 of the last 7 years, since 2013, we've been in Old City Hall. So for a couple of years, I was kind of like, we should just ask about staying in the building. Because with this theme, I always felt, well, we don't have enough time to visually do it justice. Last year's theme was Purgatory. Well, Purgatory, that's really open to interpretation. So we kind of went with more of a minimalist visual aesthetic. To me, Purgatory, dark. We don't need as much detail. A carnival or a circus, everyone's been to a carnival or a circus. They're very visual. There's rides, there's games, there's prizes. So the question was always, well, we just don't have enough time to make it as visual as we'd want. Well, last year we talked with engineering and they were like, yeah, there's no problem with you guys staying in the building. So at that moment it was kind of like, okay, next year we're doing the circus. So that's how that came about, is we finally felt we had the time to decorate, to do the theme justice.
Perfect. I know haunted house, you said on a busy night in October, bring about 300 people through. You multiply that over a few Fridays and Saturdays, you're talking some serious money. I would know, I've been the treasurer for the past few years. But for the interest of our viewers, what programming does that money go to support?
Yeah, so just to give a little history on the project, the profit can vary pretty wildly. When I first became a member, I had volunteered at the haunted house for a few years, and then in 2016 I volunteered a lot, and I started seeing like the inner workings quite a bit. And after we wrapped up that season during teardown, Danny and I talked quite a bit, and I asked her, I was like, well, what did we make? And some people are a little guarded with the financials or the inner workings, but I convinced her to give me the information. And in 2016, the haunted house, it made just over $11,000, which is a nice little profit. But we put 15 grand into that project. So in my mind, if we're putting 15 grand into that, I mean, it's a ton of hours. It is months and months that the crew's up there. I feel like you're putting in 15, we need to at least take out 15. But I remember telling Danny at the time, I said, we should be making twice that at this location. You know, we're perfectly located in downtown Wyandotte. So at Kindred, we implemented a completely different marketing plan, and we surpassed our best expectations. We made over 24 grand that year. So what this money goes to is our holiday programming primarily, our Thanksgiving dinners for families, and then the Christmas presents for kids during the holidays. But it also supports our Easter egg hunt. And then last year, we started a scholarship fund. We were able to raise $2,500 to found a scholarship for one of our teens who tragically committed suicide, and we awarded that scholarship to a graduating senior at Roosevelt this past year, Sydney Lazarick. I believe it was a Western she was planning to go to study education. So that is an important thing for the community to understand. I know a lot of people don't know the ins and outs of the haunted house industry, or they're not entirely aware of what the nonprofits in their community do. And I know there's still something of a stigma around haunted houses with certain sects of the population. But that's what this project does. Like on the financial side, it supports families at the holidays. And then last year, or this year I should say, because we were able to stay in the building, we were like, let's do a Valentine's Day haunted house. That's something that had gained in popularity throughout the industry over the last 5 years or so. And that was successful as well. And we were able to sponsor the RHS Bearbots, the robotics team. I think it was a $250 sponsorship for them. So what the money goes toward from the haunted house is really only limited by how often we can run it and how profitable that it is.
Perfect. What if people want to volunteer and help work on this haunted house? Taking volunteers?
We always. It's a funny thing because people message the Facebook page, and if you are interested, look up Wyandotte Jaycees Haunted House or look up Purgatory Haunted House, and you'll find the page. And I've been so frustrated because I've tried to update the page on Facebook about 5 times now. It's not updating. So if anyone's confused, like, but I thought it was called Purgatory and now it's Circus Sinister. Every year we retheme it. So retheme it, you need a new name to fit the theme. But if you look up that page, you can message it, and I will answer you. But yeah, we're always looking for volunteers. Number of times over the years, people just show up. They'll just come like, hey, what's going on here? Now, most of the time, they're kind of weird, and they're just kind of, wow, neato. And you're like, all right, get out of here. But once in a while, someone comes in, and
they're the right kind of weird.
Yes, they're genuinely interested, and they're like, well, how do I get involved? And then they just start showing up. And it's interesting because, I volunteered for a couple of years, and then kind of just like jumped right in, and became like one of the instrumental people running the haunted house. And the same thing's true of Shirley, who's the current chairperson, and she chaired Bloodlust. She came as a customer. This is just 3 years ago, and was taken with the project, and then became a member of the crew pretty quickly. Like within a couple of weeks, her and her cousin Jacqueline kept showing up, and then they volunteered for a couple of years, and then she joined and became a member, and now she's one of the key people as well. So when people think about getting involved, we take all ages in terms of volunteers. You can be as involved as little or as much as you want. And there's all sorts of different roles and skills people can bring to the table. Okay.
Now, what about Friendly Monster? I know the Wyandotte Jaycees run a Friendly Monster almost every year.
Yeah, so in recent years, we've only run it one day, one Sunday, I believe. But, because we're not running the haunted house this year, we felt like, well, we can run Friendly Monster several dates. So we're going to run it over 3 different Saturdays. I believe it's the 17th, the 24th, and Halloween, the 31st, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Obviously, costumes are encouraged. We are requiring everyone to wear a mask. And, we felt like that was safe. No one's being scared. You're not interacting with people for long stretches of time. Much easier to space people out than on a night, Friday or Saturday, where you might get 300 or more, and there's long wait times. I mean, Friendly Monster, like they're moving along pretty quickly from each candy station.
Yeah, it's basically a trick or treat through the haunted house with the lights on, correct?
Yeah, lights are on, so don't worry. It's not spooky. No one's gonna jump out at you. This is something mostly it's for younger kids. I mean, anyone can come, but it's it's for younger children. But yeah, the lights are on, so it's not haunt lights as we call it, or haunt conditions. The house lights are on. I mean, I helped out a couple of times passing out candy. It's fun to see the kids get a kick out of it, and I like that we do it because I look at it as outreach. It's like we got to get the bug in these kids early so they remember that when they get a little, like, you know what, I want to see the other side of that haunted house.
Very good, very good. Now, I know you mentioned earlier Bloodlust, and talking about that was the Valentine's haunted house we ran in February of 2020. Is it still going to be called Bloodlust for 2021?
Yeah, so one of the things that's difficult about picking a new name and theme every year is marketing it, branding it, because people they might be like, hey, what happened to Purgatory? Oh, it's gone. But on the other hand, it's like the tradition with the Jaycees, with the city loaning the Jaycees a building, and typically, outside of the last 7 years, a different building every year, you almost have to rename it and retheme it. I mean, you always have the Wyandotte Jaycees haunted house name attached to it. But with Bloodlust, because the theme is specific, it's Valentine's Day. That's the overarching theme. We are going to call it Bloodlust. We may give it a subtitle. This situation with COVID-19, because we aren't able to run this year, what we're hoping to do is run Circus Sinister next fall. So we've done all this work, and it was like, well, we don't want to have to retheme this for Valentine's Day now, only to retheme it back to what we have it now. So we are going to do something along the lines of Bloodlust, Tunnel of Love, something along those lines. But yeah, so the hope is that we can certainly run. This past Valentine's Day, we did a 2-night event on Friday, Saturday, which worked out real well because I think Valentine's Day fell on that Friday. And we did really well. For a first-time event, all around, it was a grand slam. We couldn't have hoped for better. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to start the year off with that, yeah.
Okay. And I know there's an important date coming up. I believe this coming Tuesday is the Wyandotte Jaycees General Membership Meeting. And it is also that time of year for elections for the Wyandotte Jaycees, where they're going to elect their new board of directors. And Joel, what position are you nominated for?
I was nominated to be president. It's been an interesting year. I told Sam, was it Sam and Michelle, after one of Sam's our current president, and you guys saw her during the first interview. I said to him, I was like, I honestly would have preferred to have been on the board one more year, maybe have done membership or maybe even a second year's management, since this year kind of got wiped out. I mean, we ran Beautiful Baby, but Beer Tent was wiped out. Haunted House to the public was wiped out. So, but the need was there, so I was like, yeah, I'm willing to do it, and I'm excited about it. It was, when I came into the organization, well, you were currently the president then, but I joined in December, so it was like right at the tail end.
I'm glad you joined during my year, Joel. Thank you.
And then Sean, of course, was president, and I remember some of the first meetings I went to. When you come into the organization, you hear all these different things, all the different projects and the socials, and you hear about the state organization and the national organization, and you hear about conferences, and it's very overwhelming. And you hear about all these other just internal things, and you're like, this is head spinning. And but I remember thinking, I was like, I'll learn, and it, like maybe like I think maybe at some point I would like to take the challenge of being president. So I feel ready for it. You know, I served on the board for part of 2018, and actually had to step away that year because of a work situation. But then served last year, and I've been on the board this year, and you know, chaired projects. So I'm excited. I'm hoping that through the haunted house, but through some of our other programs as well, that we can start to attract some younger membership.
Okay, that sounds like a good way to go with that. I know you touched on some of our other programming because that all falls under the management area, it's fundraising and PR. We had Beautiful Baby and we had Beer Tent, and Beautiful Baby was entirely online this
Yeah.
year because there was no Wyandotte Street Fair.
Yeah, yeah, and you know that was primarily you and Megan. You know, it was the one thing you can't adopt a beer tent for COVID. You
Well,
almost-
some people might like to.
you could have a drive-through window maybe, but we could salvage Beautiful Baby. So we were able to take that to an online format. Obviously, didn't do as successful as it did last year when we have that area at Street Fair with all sorts of eyeballs going by. But it was still a very successful fundraiser, and I'm glad we were able to do that because, you know, as it stands, all of our other major fundraisers were not able to run.
Yeah, we also weren't able to run Easter egg hunt. I
Yep,
know
that
Easter
was the
Egg's
first one.
community, but
Yep.
that's the first one that fell for COVID.
Yep.
Easter egg in, I believe it was March, early March. So what plans do you have if you are elected currently or uncontested? So you're the only one nominated. If you are to become the president in just a few short days, what are your plans for 2021? It's the year you get to run your great circus.
Yeah, well, first thing is hope that this whole situation is cleared up so that we feel confident we can safely run. Like I mentioned, I definitely want to focus on membership. I'm hoping to have a solid board behind me because I think that is key. And I'm encouraged by the people who are nominated for the director positions. Director position is an entry-level board position. And those people are really, they're kind of there to learn, to see the inner workings of how the organizations run. And they're new people who have never been on the board before, so I was happy to see that. I'm concerned. You know, we went from a 4 vice president system down to a 2, and no one seems terribly excited to take those positions. So that'll be a bit of a challenge, but we'll see who fills it. But I've always felt that, and I've said this before, that the chapter's lifeblood is the haunted house. It attracts so many members. We have a teen program because of the haunted house, and I will say single-handedly because of the haunted house. Like every one of those kids comes through the haunted house, and then the idea is eventually they can age into being a JC themselves. I feel like maybe my primary focus is going to be building our membership back up and getting younger people. You know, our membership currently is 21 to 40, but I would say our average member is probably in their mid-30s, maybe early 30s. You know, I myself have only got 3 years left, so you know, when I get involved with something, I like to leave it in better shape than I found it, and I feel like the only way for me to do that is an infusion of youth. I would like to see our social media presence be a little more polished. I think we've had improvements the last several years, and I think we're due for an update. We had talked about it this year, about a branding update with our logo and our little tagline. So those are all things I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there because social media, I think, was a big part of the success of Kindred and Bloodlust. It was a totally different marketing approach that we hadn't used in the past.
Yeah. When I came on board, it was one of the first things I did. I kind of wrote, I call them postmortems, like an autopsy on the season. What went right? What went wrong? What can we improve? And So this is back like in the fall of 2016. I wrote some ideas down. I took it to Danny. I was like, this is what needs to change. And the marketing it needed to be completely overhauled. At the time, the haunted house, well, it was promoted through the Fear Finder. But the online presence was, I mean, I'll tell the viewers, like I've told the other committee members, the Facebook page looked like somebody's grandpa ran it. It was scarce posts, misspellings, terrible pictures, and I was like, this has got to go. So yeah, the social media presence it's like we need to have some continuity from one year to the next, and build an audience on our page. And now we have right around 2,000 people who like and follow the Haunted House Facebook page, and we get pretty good engagement on there. Yeah, I have no doubt that helped spur things for Kindred. And then Bloodlust was kind of a different beast because it was just a 2-night event in the middle of the winter. So that was, and on a reduced budget. So I think we hit the social media even harder. We did a couple promo videos in the haunted house itself, like with one of our teens pitching Bloodlust. We did an episode like this. We passed out flyers. It was basically everything, just about everything we do to market the fall season, just on a condensed timeline. I know Shirley and I literally ourselves took, I don't remember how many flyers we had, 2,500. We went through like 12 different communities and, distributed them at bowling alleys, restaurants, any place we thought was like a high traffic place that kind of hit our age demographic. Yeah, so the marketing in anything is like, it's at least half the ball game, if not more.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned teens. For those who haven't seen an episode before, what are the J-Teens?
So because our membership is 21 to 40, currently, hopefully going to get that changed.
Trying.
We have a teen program, so teens can volunteer just like anyone else can volunteer. You don't have to be a member to be involved. At any age, you can volunteer. Our fellow directing this right now, Steve Caldwell, he is past the age of membership by a couple of years, but Steve comes out and he's actually on our haunted house committee. So the teens, in a lot of ways, are kind of the heart and soul of the haunted house. We couldn't run the haunted house without our teens. They help construct it. They help act on a nightly basis. And it's one of my favorite aspects of the project is working with the kids. In particular, I'm not much of a builder myself. If I build a ladder and I tell you to stand on it, don't. But I like working with the kids, teaching them how to scare people, teaching them how to be aware of human psychology and identifying body language and how you can use that in a character.
Perfect. So what would be your parting thoughts for people about Circus Sinister?
Keep your fingers crossed. It was a very difficult decision. I was torn. I wanted to make every effort to run, and I felt like had we had the more manpower support or less skittishness or less uncertainty amongst some of our crew, because again, a lot of our actors are teens. Their decision isn't their own; it's their parents. So in saying all that, we made every effort to run. We will continue to do that going forward. So I would say if you want to see a little preview of Circus Sinister, look forward to Bloodlust for Valentine's Day if we can run that. You'll get a little taste. Next fall, though, I think because of the lead time we've had, we will have the most visually impressive show that the Wyandotte Jaycees have put on probably in 20, 25 years.